Hey everyone, this is Zach here. Today I'm going to walk through deploying an open policy agent server with Quadlet. So the goal for today is just to quickly spin up an OPA server for various reasons. Most importantly to me, in the future, I'm going to be testing out the new feature in Ansible Automation Platform called Policy Enforcement, which the backbone is built on OPA. So I just wanted to come up with a quick way to create a sandbox environment, and I'm leveraging an Ansible organization repository that I forked and added the setup steps for running OPA with Quadlet. So quickly just scrolling through the blog here, I talk about at a high level what is OPA and what is Quadlet, and then dive into some of the file constructs that are used here, which you can take advantage of with the source code for this repository. So next step, I'm just going to hop into the code and show you guys how I run it. So here in VS Code, I've got the repository open. There is a README specifically for deploying with Quadlet. And quick security warning, this is a very basic OPA server setup, but it's great for testing. So there's no authentication here, not even setting up SSL certs, but that is possible with an OPA enterprise server. Again, this is great for setting up in your lab. So if we scroll down here, prereqs, you will need Podman on your system, as well as Make. Now, if you're not a fan of Make, you don't like to use Make, you can definitely take the steps from the Make file that I'm going to walk through and use your own scripting or whatever automation you want to set up to do those steps. Highly recommend automating it. Otherwise, you'll have to be constantly kind of repeating the same steps, which isn't great for feedback and iterating on your design. So if I scroll down here, it'll be as simple as saying make Quadlet run OPA server. So let's hop into the make file just to see what exactly that target looks like in the make file. So if you're not familiar with make, this is basically a list of commands that are going to run when I say make Quadlet run OPA server. And I've got a couple echoes here just to give you a feel for what's going to happen, but the meat of it is that we're going to take the contents of a policies directory in this repository and we're going to copy them to a centralized location. That central location is defined with an environment variable, which is at the top of the make file, which you're happy to edit. You're more than welcome to edit and it will work just fine. Ultimately, that directory is going to be mounted as a volume into the OPA server so that server can serve those policies that you've created. The next thing it's going to do is actually create the Quadlet file, which is maintained in the repo, and place it into the user space directory that's expected by Quadlet. You can see here the directory there is your home directory, .config, containers, systemd. And by placing the opa.container file, which is in this repository, into that directory, we can then reload systemd, and it will pick up that Quadlet, generate a service file from the Quadlet, which is the benefit of Quadlet. It abstracts away some of the complexities of creating a Podman service file, and it does some optimizations for you as well. And then ultimately, we can stop the OPA service. That's in case you already had it running. And finally, we start it, and we have our server up and running. So do a quick peek at the OPA container file. This is the actual Quadlet itself. I hope, like myself, you agree this is really simple and very nice. So it looks simpler to a different systemd unit file. We have a nice description there. We want our network to be online. And if we go into that container section, this is the meat of it. And you'll notice that the properties here nicely align with the Podman arguments, right? So for the most part, any argument that you would be using with the Podman command, you could actually set up as a property here in the container section, and the full documentation is linked in the blog post itself. But most importantly, right, we need an image that's required. And for me, I'm using the Docker.io open policy agent latest static tag. We then have our exec command. So we're going to run the server. I personally like to turn on the decision logs for debugging purposes. Wouldn't need that in production necessarily. The address, and then of course, we're going to add to watch for that policies directory, which is that mounted volume that I talked about earlier, and again is specified here in the file. So you'll notice there is kind of a templated value, so that Quadlet policies destination. That gets replaced as part of the make command with sed. So I actually take the contents of the environment variable and replace it in here so that the actual OPA container file created in your user space has a hard-coded path to a directory that we'd like to mount. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give it a run. So make Quadlet run OPA server. See, those echoes are just nice to give me an idea of what's happening. And now what I can do is a couple additional commands just to check things out. So let's see podman images, and then we'll grep for OPA. See, we've got latest static pulled down here. To make this work, I actually set the pull policy to never for the Quadlet. So go ahead and pull that image down with podman pull prior to running this. I just did that for simplicity, and I'm not constantly chaining the container image as I'm developing new policies. The next thing we can do here is check the status of the service. So systemctl-user, because we set this up in the user space, status, and then OPA. We can see that we have an active running service. Additional thing, if you are curious and want to see what the actual generated systemd file looks like, you can actually do this user libexec podman and then Quadlet and do a dry run. And we're also going to specify the user space. And you'll see here that it actually gave us some example output of what the service file that ultimately gets generated is. And to me, this is the value of the Quadlet, is I only have to maintain what I showed earlier, and this is what systemd can auto-generate for me, adding some podman optimizations and additional properties to make this the most efficient way possible to manage our services, which are container-based. And again, the nice thing is, like, let the OS native process manager manage our processes, as opposed to trying to hack it together ourselves with our own like podman automations. So the last thing to do is just do a quick health check. So you can do a curl localhost, and we're running this on port 8181, and they have a health endpoint in the server. You see that empty JSON object means it was successful. And then finally, if you do have this port exposed with a firewall and you can browse to it in your network, I will give you a quick view of what the server looks like. So it's a super basic front end. It's not meant to have a nice UI, but you can play around with querying against your JSON models. So I hope you enjoyed that. Stay tuned for a future post where I actually dive into integrating OPA with Ansible Automation Platform and talk about some of the policies that I've written to apply to jobs that I'm running through the platform. Thank you.